The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Tax Modernization Committee informational meeting that Farm Bureau is putting on. This is Jay Ferris here at Nebraska Farm Bureau in the office, along with Anthony Arts, who will be giving most of the presentation this evening. The purpose of this webinar this evening is to have everybody up to speed on where the committee is, a little bit in the process of what they're doing. Also, they have scheduled 5 public hearings across the state, 3 of them next week. So we wanted to do this webinar this evening just to get Farm Bureau members up to speed with that process and help them in preparing any testimony that they would like to give at these public hearings next week. With that, just a quick update on kind of how the webinar will work. Hopefully everybody has their speakers on their computers. They can hear us. If you have a question at any time for Anthony or myself, and also Craig Head just joined us, feel free to raise your hand if you're either on telephone or if you have a microphone hooked up to your computer. There is a little icon that looks like a hand. You can click on that. It will raise your hand. It will give us the indication that you have a question. There is also, so that's one option. The other option is you can type in your questions into the question box. And I will see that, and then I will be able to stop Anthony and ask the question to him. So with that, we do hope we have some questions here as well. I'm going to turn it over to Anthony and let him start with the presentation.
All right. Thanks, Jay. So I'm going to start off here tonight just by kind of giving you sort of a legislative history of how we got to where we are right now with the formation of the Tax Modernization Commission. For some of you, this will be old news by this point. You've sort of heard this recap before, but I think it's just important to kind of keep things in context and remind ourselves sort of what kicked this all off. So the early push for tax reform, happened at the beginning of the last legislative session when the governor introduced his tax reform proposals in the form of 2 bills, which were introduced on his behalf by Senator Bo McCoy, LB 405 and 406. These 2 bills propose to eliminate in one instance and significantly reduce in another the income tax in the state of Nebraska. However, in order to maintain revenue neutrality, which was the governor's goal, his bills also proposed to eliminate a number of sales tax exemptions that are currently in place in the state, including the major ones for agriculture. The elimination of these exemptions also would have targeted manufacturing, hospitals, nonprofit, education. So not surprisingly, there was widespread opposition to these bills. On the agricultural side of things, it was targeting in excess of $200 million worth of sales tax exemptions, those for seed, chemicals, fertilizer, ag machinery and equipment. And so widespread opposition, and it wasn't long after the public hearings that were held here in Lincoln that the bills were formally withdrawn prior to even being discussed or voted on by the Revenue Committee. And so that killed that idea. But from that grew, and it should be LR 155 I see now, but a legislative resolution which formed what has become known as the Tax Modernization Commission. It's a 15-member commission. Senator Sullivan doubles as both the chairwoman of the Education Committee and also a member of the Revenue Committee. It also includes the chairs of the Ag Committee, Planning Committee, the Appropriations Committee, Health and Human Services Committee, and then, of course, like I said, the Education Committee, and 2 at-large members. The Commission also formed 3 subcommittees, which are focusing on some of the finer details of the 3 major taxes in Nebraska at the state and local level: income, sales, and property tax. And what the Commission decided is to go about doing its work through a series of working sessions, which were open to the public, executive sessions, which were closed door, and then, of course, public hearings, which is the reason that we're having this conversation here tonight, with them coming up very soon. Thus far, the Commission has accomplished a few things. It held 2 working sessions during which it heard presentations by experts in the sales tax, in the property tax, in the individual income tax, and in the corporate income tax, kind of the big components of our tax system here in the state. On the sales tax side, I will mention that during that presentation by the expert, of course, the commission members asked several questions. And the message was hammered home by the expert that it is not sound policy to place a sales tax on inputs into a production process, be it manufacturing, be it agriculture. You don't place a sales tax on business-to-business purchases that are then used as part of a production process. And it seems like through that testimony, through the questioning, through the conversations that we've been able to have with some of the commission members, it seems that the members of the commission, they get that. And so going forward, at least from the commission's standpoint, there doesn't seem to be as much of a threat that sales tax exemptions for like agriculture and manufacturing are going to be targeted, at least by the commission this time around. It doesn't mean that there couldn't be another bill that was thrown out by a different group or individual that could still do the same thing. Additionally, I wanted to point out that when the property tax expert came in and testified, and this is sort of maybe stoking the flames a little bit for why it's important that we get agriculture into these public hearings and share our story, is when the property tax expert gave his testimony, he made the comment that the system for property taxation should be as broad-based and low-rate as possible. And the upshot of that is that he was basically suggesting that agricultural land should be taxed at 100% of market value in his expert opinion. And I mean, it's important to remember that the body is increasingly made up of urban senators from Lincoln and Omaha who really maybe don't have the best working knowledge of what it takes to run a farm and the amount of capital involved in it. And so we also have started to hear, unfortunately, certain senators also asking the question, well, my home is taxed at 100% of market value. Why is agricultural land not taxed at 100% of market value? And so there seems to be a little bit of a lack of understanding of the policy history and why we have the current system in place that we do where ag land is taxed at 75% of market value. So that's kind of an overview, some of the most important things that, at least from our perspective, that came out of some of those working sessions that were open to the public. And so the commission took what it learned during those working sessions. Of course, the subcommittees were meeting on the side. The commission was meeting privately through its executive sessions. And what it decided that it wanted to do is that it was hearing all sorts of ideas about all the different taxes, sales, income, property. It wanted to basically release a list of preliminary sort of issues and options that it had either heard frequently through its discussions with other people, that it had come up in its own internal discussions, sort of the most frequently referenced options for providing tax reform to each of the major, I'll say 3 taxes: income, sales, and property tax. Originally, it had planned to release this list on August 30th. I think the date was actually September 6th when they finally got around to issuing this list. They shared it with several interested parties and stakeholders. And this is not a list of commission recommendations. Rather, they're simply just saying these are options that are out there. Please, when you come in to give your testimony during our public hearings, maybe try to keep some of the comment, focus on what we're throwing out here, and that'll help sort of provide some structure to the public hearings. That being said, and Jay Ferris might get into this a little bit more, people are by no means actually confined by what's on the list. If you feel like there's a pressing issue or feasible solution that isn't on the list, by no means don't pass it up during your public testimony if you plan to give it. I think our goal as an organization has been and remains to be that it's kind of driving home the point that if we're talking tax reform, you have to include discussion about property taxes, which was noticeably absent when the governor introduced his tax reform proposals. The slide that I have up here in front of you, I actually went through the list that the committee released and or the commission released, and sort of pulled out the issues and options that were included in it that were most relevant to agriculture. Like I said, these are not commission recommendations. They're just saying these are mechanisms out there for providing some sort of reform. And so the first one is one that we're fairly familiar with. It's the idea of reducing ag land assessment valuations from the 75% of market value. It doesn't go on to specify to what it would be reduced to. Of course, Farm Bureau introduced bills last session that would reduce it to 65% market value, but the commission doesn't specify. So that's one idea that they throw out. Another idea that they throw out is the idea of implementing an income capitalization approach for agriculture. Of course, one of the concerns that we hear is that, you know, using a market value comparable sales approach to arrive at some sort of a value for ag land is not necessarily translate into an ability to pay just because your land and land around you is valued at X%. It doesn't mean that given a wild commodity market or rising input costs that you actually have the ability to pay that property tax bill. And so some people, there's a contention that an income capitalization approach, which would take into account some various factors that would maybe better capture the ability to pay of the taxpayer, maybe that would be a more equitable way to value agricultural land. And that approach is used in many of our surrounding ag-based states like Kansas. They actually use a use value approach, but Kansas and Iowa, I think Missouri as well, in Illinois. So it's definitely not unprecedented. There have been some attempts in the past to implement something like this here in Nebraska. They ran into some constitutional issues with the Uniform Proportionate Clause, and so I'll just throw that policy history out there as well. But it's certainly an idea that's being discussed. Another idea the commission threw out was to provide an income tax credit. This is a little bit more novel. Provide an income tax credit to help alleviate personal property tax burdens paid on ag machinery and equipment. There's another proposal that would just eliminate ag machinery and equipment from the personal property tax roll completely. And of course, the last one related to property taxes is to actually increase the funding that goes into the property tax credit program, which of course benefits all taxpayers, property owners who pay property tax in Nebraska, proportionate to the amount of value that they contribute. And it's currently being funded at $150 million a year, and so a proposal would be to increase that. On the sales tax side, like I said, it seems like you know, business inputs are, at least from the commission's perspective, safe from being taxed or the exemptions being removed. However, you know, an idea that's out there, it's a bill that got kicked out to general file last year, LB 96, would remove the sales tax for ag machinery and repair parts, basically acknowledging the fact that these two are an input into the ag production process, and furthermore, several of the states around us do not tax these parts, and so it creates interstate disparities that are not beneficial to the state of Nebraska. So that bill is actually on the floor. And then finally, one idea the commission kind of came up with is maybe we just needed to develop some sort of a systematic, periodic process for reviewing sales tax exemptions, or maybe even placing a sunset on all sales tax exemptions so that every 5 years, if the legislature does not, you know, deliberately and explicitly vote to continue those sales tax exemptions, they would expire. And of course, that's something I would think would, from our perspective, that would be very negative because it would turn it into a political battle every time around. Those are just some of the not recommendations, but issues that the commission threw out in its report that relate directly to agriculture. And there's a bunch more that, you know, relate to homeowners, that relate to the income tax, you know, lowering the top rate, broadening the base, things like this. And there's also some scary issues that are thrown out there. For instance, like making the property tax system progressive, which of course would be kind of a nightmare for agriculture, given that there's such a large amount of property and capital that's required to maintain a viable farming operation. And by progressive, it would mean those with a higher value in property would be taxed at a higher rate. So there's these, you know, there's a bunch of ideas out there, and it's important that, you know, we get there to these public hearings and really help lay out for the commission members, this is where we're at with our, you know, this is how the tax system affects our operations. This is what we're proposing. And so these, as Jay mentioned at the very beginning, these public hearings are coming up. I know we got people on here from all over the state. And so this list is basically highlighting each of the 5 public hearings that the committee is going to be holding over the next month, starting with Scottsbluff on next Monday, followed by North Platte the following day, and then Norfolk 2 days later. I think kind of as an organization, we're really going to be focusing on these first 3, in the rural areas of Nebraska. It's not every day that you have a chance that the commission actually, a commission made up of senators comes to your area where you can actually go and offer testimony as opposed to having to make a trip to Lincoln or whatever. And then October 17th and 18th, they'll be holding the hearings at Omaha and Lincoln, which, not surprisingly, will probably, there'll be a lot more probably interest at these. There'll be the education. Go ahead. Oh. Okay. So it's really important, I think, that that ag and rural interests have a present at these first 3 hearings. And I guess one thing I'll say is that it's a little different in the sense that they threw out this list to sort of help to structure the testimony that's offered. And part of that has to do with it's different than a regular hearing where you have a bill and you go in and say I support or I oppose this bill or I'm neutral on this bill. This is open to anything. You can throw out whatever ideas you want, say whatever you want, explaining your situation, and so it's kind of a wide open floor for discussion. I'll stop there on this slide.
Yeah, we do have a hand raise. Bob Kramer, if you have a microphone, you can ask your question. And maybe Bob doesn't have a question, maybe just to hit the button. But again, I will reiterate, if anybody does have a question, they can simply hit the hand icon and it raises your hand, gets our attention that you may have a question. There is also the ability to ask questions, type them in the question box, and we can ask questions that way too. So, Bob, I'm going to assume either you don't have a microphone or maybe you don't have a question. So, Anthony, go ahead.
Actually, Jay, if you want to jump in here, we're kind of to the point where we're going to get into some of the finer details about how the testimony would work at these public hearings and how they'll be structured.
Sure. Well, and this is information that has been provided to us from the commission or the committee itself. And what we're understanding is they are going to limit testimony for each person to 5 minutes. And with that, even though they do have a start and a stop time, we've also understand that they will stay there for as long as it takes to get everybody that wants to testify in. So that was some questions we had. Was there going to be any structured time? And if you didn't get testified by that time, you're out. But they are going to try to accommodate everyone that would like to testify. When you arrive, there will be sheets to fill out. So if you are wanting to offer some testimony, you will need to get your name on that sheet, and I believe it will be a first come first serve when the testimony, so they'll just ask for for who wants to come up, and there'll probably be an on deck circle, I would assume.
I would assume.
Yeah, or they may take them in order of how they've signed in. We're not quite sure on that. But one thing that they did ask is they would like to have copies of any testimony that you prepare. And they do want 25 copies of that, and that would be enough for the senators that are in attendance, that are on the committee, and with also all the staff and any media. There will be 16 on the committee itself, but they do ask for 25 copies. And the other thing, too, if you're presenting, if you have some testimony and you want it just to have us take a look at it, we'd be willing to do that too, and maybe offer some suggestions. So just send us an email, send it to myself or Anthony, and we can have that take a look at it, just if you want us to look over and kind of proof that for you a little bit. A couple things to keep in mind. The legislature is sending this committee out to rural Nebraska and to our areas, and I think it's very important that we have a good, strong showing of farmer rancher members, Farm Bureau members at these hearings. This is our opportunity to tell our story on how these taxes affect our operations. And so if we choose to stay home, that will send a message to this committee and to the state, to the senators at large, that this isn't an issue we care about. And I know it is an issue we care about. So want to encourage you to, everyone on the call, and to attend the hearing that's closest to you in your area, but also bring a friend. Bring someone that may not be a Farm Bureau member, or bring a carload of Farm Bureau members to this hearing as well too. A couple of things, and we do have some information online as well too, but when preparing your testimony, a couple of things. Stress that property taxes must be part of the discussion for any tax reform in Nebraska, and also emphasize that sales taxes on inputs should not be part of this process, and that's inputs into agriculture or manufacturing, anything like that. That's something that we're really wanting to stress as an importance. Also, the additional information, everyone that received the email from us yesterday on this webinar this evening also had a link to our website that has additional resources for you to use in preparing any testimony or answering any questions to your friends or neighbors on this. It's on nefb.org. You will need to go to the members only portion of our website to get the good stuff. So if you haven't logged in to our website yet and signed in, you will need to do that. We can assist you with that too. Just give us a call. We'll be happy to help you with that. But you can see the page that's up on the screen now is our tax reform page that's specifically designed for this issue. And if you scroll down to the bottom, this top part talks a little bit about the background, also gives the dates for all the hearings. And then the next page, if you scroll down, you will see some resources, and that has some links. The first one is to register for this webinar tonight. Tomorrow that will turn into a place where you can go watch a recording of this webinar that you saw, but also additional information, our talking points, some other things from the commission and that type of thing. So that's pretty much the structure, Anthony, unless I forgot anything, or Craig on that end of it. We're going to open it up for questions, and I do see we do have another question, so I'm going to unmute Nathan Bartles. Nathan, are you on?
Oh, yeah. I dropped the phone. I was typing my question in.
Okay.
Do you hear me? Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
Will Nebraska Farm Bureau have a testifier for Farm Bureau at each of the 5 hearings, all 5 hearings?
Okay, that's a good question, Nathan. And to answer that question, Nebraska Farm Bureau will have one official testifier, and that will be Steve will do that, and I believe that's going to be in the Lincoln hearing, Lincoln or Omaha?
Omaha, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So that's going to be the official testimony. We do have some people that have, we want individuals to testify at all the other hearings. Out in Scotts Bluff, I believe we are working with a couple of county farm bureaus there. We're going to help them provide some testimony that is from those local county farm bureaus. And that being said, if you do testify and you identify yourself with Farm Bureau, that is certainly fine. But if you happen to get a question of, will Farm Bureau support this or this, remember, you're not giving the official Farm Bureau testimony, so please refer that to when Steve Nelson gives the official Farm Bureau testimony at the Omaha hearing. So, does that answer your question, Nathan?
Well, so you'll try to get somebody from maybe Sarpy or Douglas County to testify at the one in Omaha.
Yeah, we'll definitely put out the word and get local folks to testify at. Again, we want as many individuals as we can get at all of these hearings.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? And Jay Rempe is on as well too. I just unmuted Jay's line. I want to see if it's working. Yep, and he said, please unmute me. So, Jay, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me, Jay?
I can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up what Nathan was asking. We feel it's vitally important to get members to these hearings and give their opinions on these tax issues, and I guess on stress, the property tax issues. And from the committee is going out about the state. They hear from Nebraska Farm Bureau every year in Lincoln, and we do plan to give our testimony in Omaha, but it's vitally important to get as many members to these hearings as possible. And I just wanted to stress that fact, and that's the reason why we are not testifying at each one of the hearings, because we think it's more important for them to hear directly from our members on these issues.
Thanks, Jay. Jay Ferris actually just had to step out, but he got a phone call. So I guess, is there any other questions? Maybe we'll just hang tight until Jay comes back. He might have a member called in with a question.
Hey, Anthony, this is Jay again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I was just going to suggest to members that are thinking about testifying, don't hesitate to share with the committee members if you testify the amount of property taxes that you pay overall, because at the last couple of hearings we had on the tax issues in Lincoln during the legislative session, a couple of members did talk about the number of acres that they had and the amount of property taxes they paid, and I could tell senators from Omaha and Lincoln were rather shocked at the dollar amounts that are involved in terms of the amount of dollars or property taxes that agriculture pays. So I would encourage members to share with the committee members their personal stories in terms of property taxes paid and how much they've increased over the last 5 years.
That's a really good point, and I think any kind of quantitative sort of information that you can provide to the senators, be it the property taxes paid or what the sales tax, sales tax that would have to be paid, or the cost of inputs for farming and ranching. People always kind of come back and say, well, the commodity prices have been high, but the price of inputs is rising extremely fast as well, and property taxes, high property tax burdens just add to that cost. So.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments? Again, we did record this. We will make this available tomorrow. I did have one person that just called me on the phone here a second ago that had problems getting logged in, so please share the recording of this webinar with others as well too, so we can get more people to watch. Okay. But any other questions at this point in time? Again, you can raise your hand or you can type it into the question box on the screen. I do have a question from Ernie. I'm going to unmute Ernie's mic. Ernie, are you there?
I think I am. At any rate, I'm sure going to give it a try. Are you hearing me?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay. On the valuations for property in relation to the differences between property values in, say, Sarpy, Douglas, and Lancaster County versus out west, and they, of course, in the eastern part of the state feel that we can pay the bill because we've got $8 corn. Well, we don't anymore, and I don't see it in the future. But at any rate, there's a lot of valuation in Omaha and Lincoln and those areas that probably could be better represented by the valuation process. I was wondering what the frequency is of review of property valuations in Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster County versus how often we have to do it out here, and we have to do it out here about every year, as I understand. Who does actually set the parameters for valuations? They change rapidly, and do Omaha and Lincoln and those areas have to follow the same kind of time frame as we do out here in establishing the valuations?
Yeah. Well,
I think that what we're sitting around looking at each other here in the office is I think they have to reassessment every 3 years, and that's required by statute, and that's conducted, by the local assessor and reviewed by the Property Tax Assessment Division at the state level. And I believe that applies for all property classes. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if Jay Rempe would want to jump in here too.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Anthony's correct in that for residential properties, they review it every 3 years, and that's the same all across the state. For agriculture land, though, it's reviewed and adjusted every year, and that's the same for all across the state as well, Ernie. And those are set in statute. The frequency and how they go about doing it is all set in state law.
Mm-hmm. But by the same token, many of the businesses in our more populated area probably escape the frequency evaluations that we're subjected to here in agriculture, which is really not a fair playing field. Did you hear me?
Yes, we did.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and I definitely see your point. And that's really kind of an angle that hasn't been discussed a whole lot, actually focusing on the actual assessment reevaluation process. So.
Okay, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions. Once again, would like to thank everyone for being on the call this evening, and if you have any other additional questions as they may come up through the rest of the week, please feel free to give us a call here at the office. Anthony, myself, Jay Rempe, Craig Head, all can help get you steered in the right direction if we don't know the answer to your question. Just looking a little longer here to see if there aren't any further questions, but anything we forgot, Craig or Anthony?
That's what I know of.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and say we're ready to sign off here. And again, thank you everyone for being on the webinar this evening. And we hope to see you next week at one of the hearings or the ones in Omaha and Lincoln coming up in October. So again, thank you everyone for being on the webinar this evening.